Napa know-how.
The Napa guy knows not to judge a man by his car's multicolored paint job or absence of modern gadgetry. Who cares if it's technically old enough to vote and the windows are powered by the strength of your left arm? Your monthly payment is zero, and it'll stay that way. Because with over 500,000 parts and a little Napa know-how, you can keep anything on the road. She may not be pretty, but she's all yours. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, and you've reached Venus Unplugged. And what we do here is explore the archetype of Venus on a celestial level, emotional level, in our worlds, in our beauty, in our hearts, and our shadow. Let's not forget the shadow. So last week, I attempted to work on the archetypal tarot image of the tower. And what happened? I suddenly got disconnected. Everything kind of blew up. I couldn't get back onto the Blog Talk Radio. And so, ladies and gents, you had a living example of the tower. Now, for me, realizing immediately that I was in an alchemical space, the tower had spoken, and the day continued to be the tower. There was nothing, but I mean nothing I could do as I once did it, which I considered correctly. Obviously, the tower had a different experience. Now, thank God I've spent 30 years in the underworld learning about this stuff. So I was able to accept it immediately. Once, I tried several times, it's not like the tower happens and then you just kind of lay down and die. You don't do that. It's like you become hyper vigilant. Like a game of tag when you were a kid. You're running after one another, but every corner somebody could have jumped out or tripped you. So the tower, when I couldn't get back and I began to realize, okay, so now we have a living teaching. Not only for me, it was my moment for the tower to announce itself. And the tower usually announces itself rather rudely, or so we consider, where everything just blows up, our beloved plans, what has always worked for us, the person who's always been there, suddenly that day cannot be there. And, it's that kind of stuff. And so let's say you're working with somebody or you're in some therapy, and the person is usually there, which is part of your agreement with one another. But that particular day or moment or hour, they can't. That means you know enough to figure this out. It's kind of the completion of the Saturn return. It's like clip. And you can use what you have learned to understand the dynamics. What was happening once I realized, and I thought it was, it'll just be the radio show. Okay, no way. Several other things happened. On one way, freeing me up. On another way, it was like, okay, well, all right, then I can go do these other things. Well, yeah, that's what you think. So I did everything, and I'm usually a pretty proficient person. I get things done, and I'm well-balanced most days, but that wasn't happening that day. I did everything. Everything. It's hilarious. But at the same time, I wasn't sure what needed to be blown up, but obviously I was going to find out at some point. But I did feel down deep in my heart, in my being, in my psyche, a clearing. Something was being cleared. And it wasn't important for me to have the details as much as I knew, well, that gig's up, whatever that might be. And so a new way of perception was coming in, and it's also an experience in everything changing in one flash moment. It's like a bomb, okay? And then your whole life is changed, and that's it. And you start. So the quicker you can sanely, because it is nerve-wracking. There is no two ways about it. Or it can come in a way that somebody who always says yes suddenly says no. And you're like, wait a second, but you've always said yes to my request. And we get all upset, and then we try to sell them on our idea and that they really shouldn't say no to us because this is blah, blah, blah. But you had to realize, no, you thought you had it in the bag. You thought for sure that person would say yes. So that's a tower moment, too. Or you think for sure the angels or the gods or whoever we're contacting for assistance are going to say yes. And sometimes it's no. And no means the prayer was answered. It's no. Because you may think it's a groove idea, but the Holy of Holies does not. So we can't always see which way we're going. But when we have a sense, or at least trying to have a sense, that the universe, or the universe that we know, you see, we've got the universe, and we've got the heavens, and we've got psyche, we have all of that. But then beyond that is eternity. And eternity has a whole different set of realities and rules in consciousness. So we just keep going. So that was the living experience. So for those of you that tuned in and got like 13 seconds of the show, you got that experience. So the tower in the Tarot, the Arcana, it's number 16. They call it the Tower of Destruction, but it's also the stroke of liberation. Something that we're enclosed by. Suddenly we're free from. So the tower was, symbolically, a tower was originally like a vehicle for connecting spirit and matter. Kind of provided a staircase, so to speak. Very often a spiraling staircase, like the double helix, and where the gods could descend and man could ascend. So it was kind of this dramatization concept that there was a correspondence between the earthly and the heavenly orders. It's also like being struck by lightning, or a moment of absolute struck by intuition, and the intuition just for no logical reason at all, because it's not a thinking function, it's an intuitive function. It's lightning strikes, and all bets are off. We're going to, or beach, we can resist the change, which is, it's kind of silly. That's just an exercise in fighting with the gods, instead of going like, okay, well, let me kind of breathe in and breathe out, and let me see we can have great news. We got into the PhD program we wanted, or horrible news. We can have a health crisis, and everything changes. Those are tower moments, but they also liberate us. In an unfortunate situation of a health issue, it liberates us, because then we really need to take care of the body. So it hopefully liberates us from the mundane chores and pleasing others, where you have to start saying, no, I've got to take care of myself. I can't do that. And we begin to realize time, how powerful and what an important issue time is. And if we are disrespectful of time, somebody's always late, they don't, they just that becomes a way. And even though, after a while people don't even argue with you, they either accept it or don't accept it, but, there's going to come that day, the person's going to go like, this is bullshit, I'm tired of waiting. they won't do it. Or time is like they want it immediately. They want you to give them something immediately. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. Where's the time? Where is the respect? Where is the process? That the agreement of the process between two people or a group of people that gives you time. So we need to live. Stress is created from, one of the things that stress creates is bad faith with time. We don't have a sense of it. We don't respect it. We don't understand it. So that's one of the ways that when something just changes, and it's going to change forever, and we know that, if we can stop it just for a second and take a different approach and go like, wow, I am in the presence of absolute change. What else? And hopefully not with an anxiety, although it's natural to have an anxiety. Of course, it's natural for the ego to realize, like, holy moly, I am not in charge. There is something greater. See, and lightning, the symbol of lightning, and literally being hit by lightning. In the ancient times, if you were hit by lightning, you were considered holy. You were considered that the gods have chosen you. Which is kind of trippy. Because lightning, it's always been experienced as a symbol of divine energy. It's like a luminous force emanating from God. And it represents this naked power and illumination in its most primitive and immediate form. Bang! And smoke clears, and you're changed forever. So when something comes from heaven, in the image of the tarot card of the Tower, usually it's two people are being blown, male and female. Now that certainly could be, so much for that relationship, that's not going to fly. Or it can be, the internal anima or animus, okay? They're going to get blown from their limited point of view, although the Tower can be a higher point of view, but it also, if we're being way too spiritual, and everything is spirit, but nothing is earthly, and there's no compassion for what the suffering of humanity, or just the difference in humanity. Being able to go like, wow, man, they are other, and also no, they think you're other too. And then it can become humorous. And then we have that belly laugh, which I had at the end of the day, like, wow, man, they were really working me over. So, I am absolutely opened to understanding to the best of my human ability. What's up, Doc? And the sense of freedom that comes after the Tower, but not waste the freedom. Align it, use it. Clear page, new book, opened. First line, what's it going to be? Sometimes we have no idea, but the Tower lets you know. Something, it's been somebody's nice dream. Something is happening here. So when that happens in your life, when the Tower strikes, or we use this card to prepare or meditate on or work with, and seem to recognize that when something blows up and something is destructive, it's not necessarily negative. It's just your plan is not going to work. There's a greater plan, a different plan. So, and also, like on a psychological level, if we're living, too up in the air, and we're imprisoned by idealistic towers of our own making. It can be a mental construct, a philosophical, theological, political, psychological. And as human beings, we build these in our head, moment by moment, word by word. But then suddenly, enlightenment. Every time there's enlightenment, every time there's an awakening, you wake up in kindergarten again, but on a different plane. So it's not, you're not hopping over the heavens and going to be there wherever there may be. So we begin to understand that too. That's why it feels so awkward. It's like, yeah, I've just gotten a Uber upgrade, but I'm at the first level of the upgrade. So it takes a little getting used to. So when you have fallen, now, sometimes this can happen with hubris, this inflated state. Got to fall from it. Because not even the gods will tolerate hubris. That's an identification. Instead of being humble and saying, there, but for the grace of God, or gratitude, people are like, no, I did it all. Or, people say, well, I did that on my own. We can't even have a cup of coffee on our own. There's 600 people involved. From the growing of the bean to the people to the whole thing. There's no such thing as on your own. Yes, there is your initiative. Yes, there is your hard work. And yes, you need to be humbly proud that you're stuck in there and work. And all those invisible forces, Lord, there's thousands of them. But this is what it makes us understand. So it's once again the paradox, staying in the center of the paradox. Yes, this is true, but this is also true. So when we're imprisoned, particularly in this country, we're imprisoned by the whole concept of youth. The wise child. Well, they're wise to the level of childhood, but it takes the experience and the imagination to turn that into wisdom. See, then there's when we understand something, like deeply understand it, it's very, very private. And even the first time if we even do that, try to express what we understand, we're fumbling all over the place because it's so deeply private. To bring it out in the world, very often there are no words. Or you can have like an amazing dream, right? And it's like, holy moly, this is just astounding. And then you write it down and it falls flat. It's like, wow, it felt much better. And then we just write it down and we see, because it doesn't have the energy in it. It doesn't have the libido in it when we write it down. So it belongs to the dream time. And if we try to bring it into the world time, it doesn't have the same luminosity. Or when we really have a profound experience. Very often, when we try to speak of it, it's nothing. It doesn't sound so cool. Or people will joke or humiliate or make fun of. So when you have those profound moments, you sit with it before you spit it out. Because the second you give it to the world, it is no longer yours. So you can't blame the world, because that's it. They'll take it, they'll use it, and they'll swear it's theirs. They don't see the influence. Let's say if somebody takes a photograph, yes, on one level you've taken that photograph and that is yours. That's your creativity to a degree, because you did the mechanics to make that happen. But everything around, whether it's be nature or somebody set up the scene for you, you're not alone. It's yours, but it's not yours. And it's no longer yours once you give it to the world. So, and that's part of creativity. You know, these creative forces live, and it's the person that does something. You know, how many times you thought, like, you know, I thought of that. Why didn't I act on that? Well, you didn't, and somebody else did. Or perhaps it takes, 10 million people to think of an idea, and 1 to 100 people try, and then something works. So when we're blown from the tower, it's a good thing. It's the same thing with when you're choosing enlightenment. You're going to get blown up. Nothing is ever going to be the same. It's not nice. It's not sweet. It's intense. So when we have like a series of insights and it propels you to a new awareness, you've outgrown the old structure, physically and mentally. And you build, and you must destroy that structure or allow it to crumble in order to make room for the new structures that you need. You may have to sacrifice certain things in order to grow. You may find yourself changing quite a bit, and you search your heart for answers, and we often happen to give up before we can gain. We just have to surrender, lay it down. And very often, that is what the first and second Saturn return are about. It's like 2.5 years of the tower. And the greatest structure is like, wow, everything that I was taught and told to be true is no longer true for me. I thank my environment and people and education and everything that I learned, but it's not true of my being. I'm different than I ever thought I was. I never know how I became me. I didn't expect it. The only difference was that I was part of my personality is I can just, leave what I know there for a while because perhaps it's something else, and I don't have to hold on to be right. It doesn't even matter right or wrong. What matters is the process. And so I can hear about something. Well, it's like I was, 17 or something, and I was in Freudian analysis, and I'll talk about the tower. I think that's really the tower. And I only mentioned something about astrology, and it was like, astrology? Wow, what's astrology? It's like, boing! That was a tower moment. Of course, the next day I was out, found an astrologer, went to an astrologer, and, found out a great deal that was easier for me to access and understand about myself than the process of the Freudian work, because it was a language that astrology was a language closer to my soul. It's because I began to study that, never thinking it had anything to do with me. Just it was interesting. It was fascinating. It was a language that would help me understand. Because that I was very much aware of, that I didn't know who I was, and I wanted to know that. Or I suspected there was another. Maybe that's why I have 2 L's in my name, okay? One for the first Llorraine, one for the second Llorraine. You want to meet the first L or the second L, all right? So the tower, you get this sudden glimpse of insight and this sudden illumination. Like a lightning flash. And this kind of brilliant force which descends through you, rather unceremoniously, I might add, and excites or activates the truth. And the truth kind of rises. It's like a glimmer of light from the dark or the chaotic realm of your subconscious mind. Like sometimes psyche, I'll feel a question coming on, which I always know is, the drum roll moment. It's like, oh, man, if I make this question conscious, which I have to do because I can feel it coming up, so it's going to come up in symptoms. It will affect the body. Or I can just say, all right, I know these moments. It doesn't matter. I need to ask this question of myself, whether I understand it enough. And as this truth arises, these flashes of insight, and they can nag at you, or they can summon you to change, or a tower can come as a nightmare. Now, what's interesting about a nightmare is a construct of psyche, of your unconscious, to give you information that bypasses the ego. So it's a much greater truth. But the ego flips out because it's like, holy shit, I really don't understand that. What's going on, all right? And so the nightmare is really a more direct communion with the higher self, because it comes in these disturbing symbols that take us longer if we're into dream interpretation, or at least begin to respect it, or begin to say, no, that nightmare is, yes, it feels like scrambled eggs, but it's a greater truth that I need to learn to grow into. I know it's a truth. I don't know what to do with it. Don't really know what it means. But it's much bigger. And so we sit with it. We don't fight with it. We more live in a state of mystery. And we work with it. So that's another way that the tower can hit us from within. So what it does, what it always does, is it opens you to the self with a capital S, S-E-L-F, the truth of who you are. Because otherwise you wouldn't be experiencing such flashes of inspiration. And it's another reason why you keep your mouth shut. There's an old saying, if you can't tell a wise person, don't tell anybody. Because you'll get an inspiration. Now, of course, your best friend or your stranger, they're not trained to understand these things. So innocently or unconsciously, envious or whatever, they'll give you a reply that just like, oh man, that's weird. Or, you're not going to do that, are you? It's like, yes, you're going to do that. You do it quietly, and you do it in your own way, and you explore. Because at the end of your life, nobody's going to ask you, how's your best friend, or how's your mother, or a husband, or a cat, or they're going to ask you, what did you do? Not a punishment. Just like, you ask for these talents and abilities. What'd you do with them? Oh, I made a mistake. I thought my sister had the talent, and I didn't have those talents, or whatever we give our gold away. Also, there's a fabulous book. It's called The Greater Trumps by Charles Williams. And he talks about basically, he always, the shadow and light and spirit and ghosts. And basically it's about the gypsies, and they have this powerful knowledge. And basically the knowledge is that the Fool card is really, that every other tarot card is really an aspect of the Fool. That the Fool is really the kingpin of it all. And there's great truth in that. In the American Indian, it's like the Hyoka, the one who plays the Fool, the one who's jumping around like a little goose and can be making people laugh and everything. Be careful. That's the one that knows exactly what they're doing. And they've got mucho magic. So when somebody acts like a fool, and it's a conscious fool, it's because they know what they're doing. And so the Fool card. So read that, The Greater Trumps by Charles. Well, all his books are fantastic for those that are interested in the spirit world. So I got through it. I didn't know if it was going to get blown up again. The Queen Mother, the one who tells you, okay, the show's over, is just telling me that the show is over. And so work with this, because when something just lightning flash blows up, disappointments, a beloved plan no longer works, is because you've grown. And now you need to grow into that. Like when we were kids and, your mother would buy you a pair of shoes half a size bigger because you were going to grow. So the first wearing them was a little big. Okay. So next week, there will be no show. I will be up in Vermont doing a collage workshop and ripping up pieces of paper and creating towers. But the following week, I shall be here and have an absolutely glorious week, and talk to you when I get back. Bye.